All right. So a quick overview of where we're going here. I mentioned this briefly as well, but we're going to start with an overview of this particular program. What is the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship? Who is eligible to apply for it? Those kind of details, what the application looks like. Then we'll have an opportunity to hear some advice from a current student who has received this particular award. And then we will provide some information about ways that you can get started on your application to get support from various resources that our office has available here. And as time allows, pass out at least a handout to get you started on doing some brainstorming, just starting to put together that application so that you can have some takeaways here and hopefully some momentum going ahead into the fall. One point that I just want to emphasize at the beginning here, and I will say it again at the end at other points as well here, I really feel if you are eligible for this particular program, that it's worth applying, especially if you are a current undergraduate. If you are a current undergraduate who's planning to do a research-based master's or doctoral degree in an eligible field for this, I really think that that you have every reason to apply for this opportunity. I'll explain a little bit more why as we go along the way here, but I think that this is an opportunity. The application process itself really complements the graduate school application process too. And that's best case scenario, you get a great source of funding that will set you up for success in that graduate program and have a great item on your resume or CV. Even if you don't receive it, the work that will go into this, I think, will just only strengthen the quality of your applications as you're applying to other graduate programs as well. And so that's my pitch to you here at the beginning, is that if you are considering a degree that NSF would be willing to fund and you are eligible for this program here, I would strongly encourage you to consider applying. But let's take an overview of what exactly this award offers here. I do want to offer the point of clarification at the beginning here that this is information as of the most recent cycle. So recipients were just announced last week for the 2024 award year for the deadline that was last fall. And so in terms of award amounts and all the information here, that is true as of the last cycle. We're expecting sometime this summer, probably early July, for the next solicitation to be released, and it's possible that some of these things might change a little bit here. But this is a program that's been around for almost 75 years, and as a result, there's a lot of consistency for the most part here. But in general, this is an award that provides almost $160,000 worth of support available over a span of 5 years. And this comes in the form of 3 years of support for your graduate studies. That's currently $37,000 as an annual stipend that goes to you to enable you to focus on your studies and research there, and then a $16,000 educational allowance. I want to clarify here that the way that this works for NSF is that your institution will take this and it will be accepted in lieu of any sort of tuition and fees that would be charged to you here. So if you're thinking about applying to a program where the tuition is higher than $16,000, that doesn't mean that you're going to be on the hook for the difference there. If an institution accepts this fellowship, they agree to take that in exchange from this other award that really helps them out in other ways there. So tuition is going to be covered. You will receive a stipend for 3 years, and you have 5 years in which you can use that. So there's some flexibility there as well. If you're thinking about maybe doing a PhD after the master's degree, you could use this award potentially for parts of both of that. If you're in a longer program, again, a doctoral program, and perhaps there's another source of funding through your department or another opportunity you want to take advantage of, that means you have the option of electing to do something else for one of those other 2 years, and then having those 3 years of support available from this fellowship. So you designate within a 5-year period whether you're taking that particular award here. And so, as I've already kind of hinted at here, there's some flexibility that comes along with a graduate research fellowship. There's some flexibility in terms of where you're able to go with that, as long as it is an eligible program in the United States, basically at an accredited institution. You can take this award with you there. This is another reason why it's a great complement to applying to graduate programs, because it's not specific to one particular institution. You can apply to all the programs that you're considering, say this coming fall here, and then if you're offered this award here, you can take it to whichever program you ultimately choose to to enroll in here as well. Some federal programs have some kind of service requirements as well, where you agree to work for a federal agency or do some other sort of thing in exchange for having received this funding. GRFP is not like that. You get the award and it supports your studies, and there's not anything that you owe the National Science Foundation or the federal government beyond that. You can also choose the mentor and the project that you want to propose as well. It's a program that focuses on training researchers, and that's a key part of the purpose behind it there. But in terms of the actual project, you can propose the project that you want to work on in graduate school. You can connect with the advisor that you'd like to work with for that as well. So a lot of flexibility within this, and both in terms of the time and in terms of where you can take this award and what you can end up doing with it here. I do want to clarify some points about general eligibility here as well. For any questions that go beyond this, I would refer everyone to the most recent solicitation. This is a 20-page document that NSF releases every year that provides a very thorough overview of the program. I will be referring back to it a number of points here as well. And if you have questions about that, you can always reach out to me too, because I know that sometimes there are some particular eligibility situations that do come up here. But in general, one important thing is that this is funding that you have to be a U.S. citizen, national, or permanent resident for, and that this is for funding for research-based master's and doctoral degrees are two really important points to be aware of here. And so if you're doing a master's that's more of a professional focus, basically if it doesn't have a thesis requirement to it, then it's probably not going to be eligible for this year. But if you're planning to do something, again, a doctoral degree certainly, or a master's degree that has a strong research focus to it, that has a thesis component to it, then it should be eligible here. But if it's something else, as opposed to say like a Master of Engineering as opposed to a Master of Science in Engineering, then it may not be eligible here as well. It's an award that's meant to support early career development. And so I'll say more about this in terms of when you're able to apply for this in a moment here, but the purpose is really investing in individuals with potential to be productive researchers in science fields at an early stage, a kind of a critical stage of their graduate training to enable them to pursue those sort of things here as well. It's open to a wide range of fields. So I've said STEM here, but for the purposes of the National Science Foundation, that includes a number of social science disciplines. So if you're in anthropology, if you're in linguistics, sociology, political science, you can apply for this award here as well. Technically, if you're doing the history of science, or if you're in STEM education as a discipline, you can also apply for this award too. I'll give some more details on that later on, and if you look in the solicitation, you can find a very detailed list of all the many fields and subfields that fall under this here as well. But in general, science, social science, engineering degrees are eligible for the NSF GRFP here. This is for full-time graduate study, so that is something to keep in mind there. And it does need to be done. You do need to be attending a graduate program in the United States. So if you are considering a graduate program internationally, you could still apply for this as long as you're also considering some programs in the United States here, but just be aware that you wouldn't be able to take this funding to an institution in another country. There are some types of degree programs that NSF will not support as well. And I already indicated programs, degrees that are not focused on research are not ones that the NSF GRFP is really interested in, because as the name suggests, this is about graduate research here. So if you're doing a professional degree program, a law degree, business, any sort of health science or health practitioner, like a medical degree, is not going to be eligible there. And that does include MD, PhD programs, joint programs as well. Same thing with public health, with counseling, social work, and education, with the exception of focus on STEM education with a research focus here too. So in practice, this basically means Master of Science, PhD degrees are the types of degrees that you would need to enroll in. Master of Arts, if it's a social science field, depending on the type of field that it might be, could be eligible as well here. These are the eligible fields of study, but as I mentioned, there are many subfields as well here. If you look, the little box in the corner behind the screen here, if you can see me, the back of the solicitation, there are all of these different fields that they have listed out here, and you can see all sorts of different subfields that fall within some of those categories. So with under the life sciences, for example, it lists artificial intelligence, biochemistry, biophysics, cell biology, developmental biology, ecology. I'm just skipping around here. So there are probably a couple hundred subfields that are listed within all of these larger fields as well here. But broadly, these are the areas that the NSF is interested in investing in here. So if you are pursuing a degree that falls within one of these larger categories, again, it's going to be maybe a more specific area within, say, the life sciences, different aspects of biology, or within engineering, maybe it's computer engineering, maybe it's mechanical or civil, then it would be eligible for this. And again, you can look in the most recent solicitation and see a detailed list of all the many fields that fall within this as well. And it does include social sciences, in addition to the STEM fields that maybe immediately come to mind when you hear that word. One thing to note as well is that there are certain types of research that this fellowship is not really appropriate for. And this is largely with health-related research here. I will give a caveat on that in a minute, so don't immediately assume that you're not eligible for this if you're doing a program that has some connection to healthcare here. But for a little bit of context, the National Science Foundation is one important source of funding for research in the United States and for graduate study. The National Institutes of Health is another really important source of funding as well. And those two organizations basically don't want to duplicate what they're doing here. And so if you're doing a health-related project, NIH might have funding that's available for it there, but NSF therefore doesn't want to duplicate it because its mission is different from that other government entity here. And so if your research is primarily directed at health-related outcomes, if the purpose of your research is to develop a particular treatment or to diagnose a particular disease, to create an intervention, or there's some larger sort of public health outcome that's the real purpose behind it there, then it's possible that you are probably not eligible for this particular fellowship here. The same thing for programs that are clinical in focus. If you're doing patient-oriented research, if you're doing anything that has kind of like a clinical trial component to it as well, likely you are not eligible for this as well. And the same thing in certain applied agricultural fields here. I do want to clarify that there are cases in which you may be doing research that has health-related applications that would still be eligible for this. We do have students, for example, from this institution who have been in the School of Medicine and received the NSF GRFP. Biomedical engineering is an explicitly allowed field within the NSF GRFP. Every year, people in clinical psychology programs are awarded NSF GRFP funding. So it depends in some cases on the nature of your specific research. It depends on how you present the project there, and I'll say a little bit more about that later on here. So if you are interested in research that might have health applications to it there, don't assume that you're automatically ineligible. But if your program is, if it's med school that you're looking at there, or if it's primarily a clinically based program, if it's like in pharmacology or something there as well, where really the whole purpose of the discipline is about health outcomes, then you're probably not going to be eligible. But it really does kind of depend. And if you have specific questions about your eligibility there, I'd be happy to have a one-on-one conversation and kind of talk through that, because there are some nuances around this as well. But big picture, if health outcome is the main focus of your research there, you may not be eligible for NSF. Another thing that is important and ever confusing to people is the complicated eligibility rules for this particular fellowship. If you're a current undergraduate, good news, you can apply. It doesn't get more complicated than that. As long as you are going to have finished your bachelor's degree by the time that you would start the fellowship, which in this case would basically be in the fall of 2025, if you were to apply for this coming cycle here. And you can apply every year until you're enrolled in a graduate degree program. So if you decide to apply this year, And then, maybe you decide, actually, I don't know if I want to go to grad school next year. Maybe I'm going to do a post-bac. You could apply next year while you're doing a post-bac there. Your eligibility is exactly the same. And it needs to be for your first graduate degree program. It would be somewhat unusual if you already have a graduate degree and are still enrolled in a bachelor's program of some kind, but that would be a particular situation. If you're a current graduate student, you need to apply within what the NSF describes as the first year of your first graduate program. And so if you have previously earned a master's and are currently enrolled in a graduate program, unfortunately, you would not be eligible, or any other type of graduate degree. These are the situations every year I get questions from students about here, because it gets a little more complicated with these sort of situations. But basically, if you started your first graduate degree last fall 2023, you can apply next year if you haven't already applied for this. If you will be starting your first graduate degree in the fall of this coming year, in the fall of 2024, you can apply in that cycle, or you could wait and you could apply in the next cycle here. The way the NSF counts it counts the summer as part of an academic year. And so if you started your program in the summer, or are going to start your program this summer, you would have to apply this coming fall. Because if you waited to do it the next year, by NSF's particular logic, you would have done more than a year based on the way that they count semesters and things as part of that as well. But in principle, if you are either in your first graduate program and you started last fall, you can apply next fall. Or if you will be starting your first graduate program, you can apply in this coming fall or the year after that as well. Basically, you can apply in your first year or your second year. It depends a little bit on when the program started there. Again, I'm happy to talk about individual situations there, because every year I get a number of students who have particular enrollment related questions around this year. But that's broadly what this looks like as well. There's a little bit of additional language if you're doing like a joint program, like a BSMS program, in terms of, it depends on the year that you're applying for your eligibility there. And if you have earned a graduate degree, this is the only exception for people with graduate degrees, and it was more than 2 years ago and you're not currently in a graduate program, you can apply. Everything really clear? I don't get to make the rules here. This is, I think, needlessly complicated, but this is the criteria for this. And again, if you have particular questions, please let me know. I'm happy to walk through it. But if you're a current undergrad, it's relatively straightforward. For grad students, it's a little bit more complicated. But in most cases, it's not too challenging to figure out what that's like. And NSF does have on their website a little quiz you can take, answer some questions, and it can give you an assessment of what your eligibility is like there. The other really important thing to mention for anybody who is a current graduate student or who will be applying while in a graduate program, if you're going to be starting a grad program next fall, is that you can only apply for this opportunity once. So you do have to make a decision. Do I apply in my first year, or do I decide to wait maybe and apply in my second year? That's another sort of thing where we can kind of talk through that as well, because there's a certain logic to when you might want to apply. And it's partly going to depend on a number of factors that may be individual to you. But current grad students can only apply once. If you're an undergrad or if you're unenrolled, you can apply every year, basically, that you would still meet the other eligibility criteria here. Questions about this? I'm going to pause actually for this one here, because again, there tend to be a lot of questions around eligibility here. So does anybody have a question around your ability to apply for this fellowship?
Hello, I have a quick question.
Yeah, please.
So as an undergraduate, I know you mentioned that the application includes like your research project, but if you're transitioning into a graduate program, which you don't know your project yet, how does that apply?
That's a great question. Yeah, we'll talk about the application of components a little bit later on here, but the short answer right now is that you are going to write a research proposal that is basically a project that you could plausibly carry out as a graduate student. So that could be a number of things. It could be something new. It could be something that you develop in conjunction with a potential mentor at a program you'd like to go to. It could be something that is sort of expands upon research that you've done as an undergraduate there, but it's something that's going to describe something that you envision that you could end up working on as a graduate student there. However, you are not bound to carrying it out there. You're not obligated to to pursuing research exactly as you described it in this particular opportunity? So that's a really good question. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about the specific application components, and I can elaborate on that point a little bit later on there. But that's, you don't need to worry that you have to be locked into a certain research proposal, or that you're not going to have anything that you're going to be able to write on because you're not sure exactly what the research might look like depending on where you end up going.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions at this point? Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and continue on here. Here's an overview of what the timeline for application generally looks like here. So the application for the GRFP is typically the third week of October. Those dates will be announced when the next solicitation is released sometime this summer. Again, I expect late June, early July. Every year, there is one day within that third week of October, if they keep it consistent here, that applicants for certain fields end up applying for. So the due dates are going to vary a little bit. So for depending on the field that you're in. So for example, in this most recent cycle here, the Monday of that week was the date that all the life sciences applications were due. Engineering was due on the Thursday of that week there. So there will be a day within that week where, depending on the big category of the program you're applying to, that will be the specific deadline for it there. Then they give a little bit of extra time for recommenders to submit reference letters as well. So if you're planning to apply for it, you're going to be submitting your GRF application sometime mid-late October there. As I mentioned before, this is an opportunity that I think really pairs well with graduate study because a lot of grad school applications, a lot of deadlines are going to be a little bit later in that fall or into the early winter there. So, November into December is oftentimes when you might have deadlines for grad programs there. And so if you've already been working on your GRF application, which again has a lot of the same features in terms of the kind of things you need to be writing about and explaining that a grad school application is going to have, then you've given yourself a bit of a head start there. So you already have some good materials ready to go before you actually need to start hitting submit on some of those graduate school applications there. And then announcements for the award typically come out in late March or early April. It came out the first week of April this year. Last year, it came out at the end of March. And then you have some time until late spring to determine if you're going to accept the award or if you're going to decline it for some reason, and then determine if you're going to take that funding or if you're going to postpone funding for a different time period there. NSF uses the language tenure and reserve to describe that. So remember, I said that you have 5 years of funding, and or rather 3 years of funding and 5 years to use it in. The years that you take that funding, you are considered to be on tenure for the fellowship. The years that you choose not to take that funding, you are considered to be on reserve. So you just have to make a decision about what that status is going to be. And then the following fall is when the fellowship year will actually begin, and you'll receive payments for that, and your institution will receive the money for the tuition and things like that. So you'll apply this October for graduate programs that would then begin fall of the upcoming year here. So in this case, we're talking about a deadline in October of 2024 for grad programs that's for funding, at least, that will begin in the fall of 2025. I've mentioned already that the application complements grad school applications here. These are the materials that you actually are going to need to submit for the GRF application here. So there's an online application portal that will open up once the next cycle officially begins later this summer here. You will have an opportunity to enter in a lot of personal information. There's not a required resume or CV that you upload, but you will have fields where you can basically input the kind of information that would be on your resume or your CV in terms of work experience, research experience, awards, honors, publications, information about your education, indicating the field of study that you're choosing to submit your application in here, that kind of information there. The bulk of the application that you're going to be working on are the 2 written statements. The personal statement, technically called the personal relevant background and future goals statement. I'll just call it the personal statement for short, but it does touch on all those points there. And then the graduate research statement or the research statement here. The personal statement is a 3-page single-space document. The research statement is a 2-page single-space document, and I'll say more about both of those in a minute here. You'll also submit transcripts for all of your collegiate and graduate level education there, and then you'll have letters of reference as well. You need a minimum of 2 for your application to be read, and you can have up to 3 that will be read by reviewers there. And NSF strongly recommends, and I strongly recommend, that you get 3 letters of reference from people who can speak to your potential for research, your intellectual abilities, and your capacity to be successful in graduate programs. Basically the sort of people you should be asking for that. So those are the materials that you are going to be submitting, but we'll say a little bit more about what that looks like here. But before doing that, I want to talk about how your application is actually going to be evaluated here. So there are 2 criteria that NSF uses to evaluate proposals here, and they are supposed to be weighed equally by reviewers. And those are intellectual merits and broader impacts here. So we'll take a little bit of time to talk about both of those criteria, because that's really important for understanding how to put together a strong proposal, is making sure that you're speaking to the things that you're actually going to be evaluated on here. And so intellectual merit is basically, how is this proposal going to advance knowledge within your field? What's the scientific contribution here? And it's both the contribution of the research you're proposing and your intellectual merits, because this is an individual fellowship. This is about investing in you and your potential to be a researcher, to be a scientist in training here. And so they're looking for evidence both that the research you want to do promises to advance science, and that you as an individual are going to advance knowledge in your particular field here. So this can look like, for you as an individual, different pieces of evidence that demonstrate your intellectual ability and your experience here, your grades, the courses they've taken, awards that you've done, publications, posters, research experiences, particular technical skills that you have. All of those things are evidence of your intellectual ability, your intellectual merits. In addition, it's also going to be about the merit of your particular proposal. Is your research on a topic that's of importance to your particular field here? NSF is all about basic science. In contrast to, say, applications-based research, they want to know, how is this going to lead to understanding fundamental phenomena, to advancing knowledge within a discipline, to refining or challenging existing theories and frameworks for understanding things here. This is also a place where they're looking at evidence of your ability to carry out research, because again, this is about training, investing in the training of future researchers here. So what is your ability to plan and conduct research? How well have you worked in research environments, individually or as a team, depending on your discipline, if that's something that's important there? Have you had the opportunity to interpret and communicate results? Have you presented at Discover USC or had opportunities to do other kinds of outreach or presentation work there? Evidence that you have the ability to solve problems, to take initiative, to be effective, to think creatively, to have intellectual curiosity. Those are all pieces of this criteria of intellectual merit. And we will actually do a workshop later this summer that is just about the review criteria that will go into much greater detail. And we'll talk about a lot of examples of what this can look like in the context of this particular fellowship opportunity as well. But just to keep you aware of this as we're getting started here, that's one really important criteria. The second one is broader impacts. And this is the part where you can talk about how the research is going to maybe have applications in various areas here. And so this is asking, how does the activity that you're proposing, through your research or the things connected with your research, benefit society or advance what NSF calls desired societal outcomes? And as is the case with intellectual merit, this is both about the broader impacts of your research, but also your broader impacts. How do you make a difference? How do you advance positive outcomes as NSF defines them here? The list that I've given right here are all examples that NSF provides. And this is not exhaustive. This is just meant to get you to think about the different ways in which research can have a broader impact there. And so this could be both in terms of the research itself, what its applications are. Is it going to have a major impact to deal with particular problems, to have potential to revolutionize industry? or to meet other sort of needs there? And also, how is the research itself being done? Who's being included? Will there be opportunities for teaching and mentoring, for community outreach and engagement as part of that research, or as activities that you're going to do in connection with that research there? So it could be, things around mentoring, or around educational opportunities. It could mean opportunities to include people from backgrounds that have historically been underrepresented within the sciences there. It might mean public communication, how you're sharing about the work that you're doing. Through student organizations. Maybe you have a blog or social media that you use to share about your research there, where you have opportunities to contribute to popular publications or something that helps spread the word about the kind of things that you're doing there as well. So there are a lot of different things that broader impacts can mean. And again, we will do a session later on that will really help you think about what sort of things might actually make sense in the context of a graduate research fellowship here. But those are the sort of things that NSF suggests and encourages you to keep in mind. And the point that I would just emphasize here is that this is about both how you make a broader impact as an individual through the things that you're involved in, how you spend your time, and then how your research and the activities associated with your research might be able to do so as well here. One thing to keep in mind is that reviewers are supposed to look for evidence of both of these criteria in all parts of the application, and they are supposed to weigh the criteria equally. I say supposed to because in reality, how a particular reviewer evaluates things sometimes, unfortunately, doesn't always follow along with this here, but these are the instructions and this is how you should approach the application. This also means that reviewers are told to look for evidence of your intellectual merit and your broader impacts in all parts of the application. So while you will actually have specific sections in that personal statement and in that research statement labeled intellectual merit and broader impacts, reviewers are not supposed to limit themselves just for that. They're going to be looking for evidence of that in the letters of recommendation that your recommenders are submitting. They're going to be looking for evidence of that, looking over your transcripts, seeing the courses that you took, looking over the information you put in about work experience or research experience there as well. So just be aware that while you will have specific spaces where you're supposed to especially address these criteria, reviewers are told to evaluate applications holistically and to look for evidence of your intellectual merit and broader impact potential and your research's potential throughout all of the components that you're going to be submitting here as well. So each part is important, and I would encourage you to think about each part, how each part is going to be able to help build that case for you, especially when it comes to thinking about letters of recommendation. So that is kind of a quick overview of the application components here. I want to pause and see if there are questions up at this point here as well. And then I also want to hand things over to our current graduate fellow to share a little bit about her experience. But before we get to that, are there questions about the information that I've just shared about the fellowship, how it works, the materials and things? Well, if not, then I'm going to go ahead and ask Tessa to introduce herself and to share a little bit about your perspective on this particular opportunity and any advice that you might give to our potential applicants here.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Tessa. I'm a third year doctoral student. I'm in the clinical community psychology program, and so I applied under the psychology umbrella, and I did have to walk that really fine line between like basic science and like clinical outcomes in my statement. So I'm happy to walk through that with anyone too that's also applying under psychology. Um, yeah, and I highly recommend applying. I thought about applying my first year, well, way back before I was even in grad school. I thought about applying as an undergrad, and then I just got kind of overwhelmed and I didn't do it. And then my first year I was like, I'm gonna apply, and then I got overwhelmed and I didn't do it. And then my second year came along and I finally applied, and I'm very glad I did. And I think one important thing to note is that there's like the different levels. I think level one is like applying as an undergrad. So those applications are all compared to other level ones, and then level two, first year grad students, those are all compared together. So if you're applying as an undergrad, you're not going to be compared to like a second year grad student. So that's just important to keep in mind. Some other tips I have, I think it does take a lot of drafts. So just be prepared to start a little bit early. I started, I think in May, once my semester was over, and I worked on it pretty steadily up until it was due in October. And so if you just like make steady progress, I didn't feel too stressed out because I had started in May. So highly recommend starting a little bit early if you can. Um, some other tips I have. I think the personal statement is probably the most important part. The NSF is always saying like it funds people, not projects. So I think, well, I focused on my research statement first. I think looking back, I would have focused on my personal statement first because that's really what matters the most. And I probably went through like the most iterations of my personal statement at the end of the day. Um, and I think the fellowship office and Matt and everyone that works there is super helpful, for, especially for getting feedback on the personal statement. I think the research statement is really great to work with your mentor or any advisors you have. And then the fellowship office is excellent for the personal statement. And another thing for undergrads, if you are applying to grad school and the GRFP, it looks really good on your application. I just helped out a post-bac RA who just applied to grad school, and she got it, and they were all like super impressed that she applied for the GRFP. Of course, they didn't know if she got it because results come out in April and she's interviewing in January. So it just looks really good on your grad applications overall. And if you actually don't get into grad school, but you receive a GRFP, you can contact programs again and be like, hey, I have my own funding. Like, is there going to be a spot for me? I've heard of people getting into grad school through that way as well. So I think it's a great program. I got like the stipend is amazing. I was making like 25,000 in my first 2 years of grad school, and then I got a $10,000 raise, which incredible. I love it so much. And just I feel like overall just having that funding and not having to worry about like taking on like a TA job or like any extra RA ships, like I just have a huge weight off my shoulders. I feel very less stressed now in grad school. Like I stopped working at 6 p.m. I feel like my work-life balance is really great ever since I got it. So highly, highly recommend. And I'm happy to chat more if anyone who has questions or just wants to hear more about the application process.
Questions for Tessa from anyone here?
I mean, I don't know if this is actually a question for Tessa, but it is a question I have. When we're thinking about the research statement specifically, any advice on brainstorming an idea? I mean, maybe just in general for now.
Yeah. Are you at the undergrad level or the graduate level?
I'm an undergrad.
Okay. Yeah. I think definitely just like talking with any professors that you're like close to or might be writing you letters of rec at this point and just like bouncing ideas off of them. For me, it was my mentor in grad school. And so I came with like kind of a soft, fuzzy idea and she helped me turn it into something more concrete. So if you have someone that you can reach out to like that or like grad students too that you may know, they'd be very happy to help you with that as well.
I would just add on to that for undergrads, I would say there are two kind of general approaches for putting together the research statements. One thing that sometimes happens is that you, as you are researching graduate programs, may be contacting potential mentors depending on your field. And sometimes they will say like, oh yeah, I would love you to come to my program and join my lab or my research group there. And I'd be happy to work with you on this proposal. So sometimes, you haven't even applied to, or you haven't even been accepted into a program there, but there are people who will say, yes, I'd be happy to work with you to do that. Every year there's some students that are sort of in that situation where they've been in contact and they're talking with our office and they're also talking with the potential research mentors. So in those cases there, they might say, yeah, you know, we'd be excited to have you. Let's think about a project together. And in that case, you could kind of do that. You're not obligated to go to that place. You know, again, the research statement is just a plausible project you could carry out in graduate school. It's a chance to demonstrate your ability to think like a researcher, like a scientist. And so, again, you're not required to carry it out. NSF is not going to come and ask, you know, where's the evidence of you know, the thing you proposed 2 years ago in terms of those results there, because it is about investing in individuals. So that's one sort of avenue. The other one I would say is that for undergrads maybe who aren't in that situation, maybe they're, you know, they haven't already sort of have a strong connection with somebody at another institution there, that proposal may be an extension of research that you've done as an undergraduate. And so you don't want to make it seem like it's just sort of like a little add-on, because again, this is a project that you would expect to do within the scope of your graduate program. So, you know, if you're applying to a PhD program, this is sort of a potential dissertation topic. It's going to be a master's program, potential like thesis topic that you could do for that particular degree there. But oftentimes it will be based out of the type of research that you may have already done. So perhaps expanding the scope of it, perhaps building on certain questions or themes that have emerged in that sort of research. You know, those are the sort of things that might be the case there. And it's going to depend again on the field, and it's going to depend on your level as well. So for undergraduates, the expectations are going to be a little different, because reviewers know that you know, you haven't started grad school yet. You know, your opportunities to be involved in research may be a little bit different there. If you're a second-year grad student, they really expect you to know, you know, what are you working on? Because you've already had a year of grad school, you're in a program, you're working closely with faculty. And so, you know, having a pretty clear idea of what that project is actually going to look at. So there is a little bit of leeway there, but I would say in general, it's either sort of something that sort of seems like a natural extension or next step from something that you may have already done, you know, a research experience you've already had, say, or a capstone project or an honors thesis or something that sort of like has demonstrated your interest in certain types of questions or areas there. Or it may be something that you've had a chance to kind of develop in collaboration with a mentor at another institution, or it could be something here. You know, you could work with a faculty member here about, like, you know, what's a project that where could I take this research if I wanted to kind of expand on it, and, you know, getting some of their thoughts about other applications. So hopefully that gives you some idea of what that can kind of look like.
Yeah, thank you. I think I might have more been asking like what's a useful brainstorming exercise, but that's a very helpful answer to a question what had but didn't ask.
Yeah, for brainstorming exercises, I think, you know, there are a number of potential things you can do there. I mean, some of this is like, where is there a space in the literature for you to make a contribution? So this is kind of like a literature review exercise as well. You know, thinking about, like, people have done a lot of studies here. What have they not done? Where is there room for kind of contribution, or what are the sort of things that you've thought about maybe that might be of interest as well? So, you know, a good research project is one that makes both an empirical and a conceptual contribution. So in some cases, you know, we need new data for something there. But it's also, you know, how is that data going to answer a question and you know, drive a scholarly conversation? So those are some things to kind of be thinking about. What are the conversations that you want to be part of? You know, what are the bigger issues that are going on in your field there? And I'm not in my office right now there. I can recommend a book at some points about that has like a number of really good exercises for kind of formulating research projects too, if you send me an email. But that would be kind of a good starting point for sort of thinking about that.
I will add, I really loved, like, I had like my general topic idea, and then just like going to the future direction section of like research articles was like super helpful, like quick, seamless way to find like gaps in the literature. I'd recommend.
Other questions here? I'll also share that Tessa is one of our graduate fellowship peer mentors as well. And so we have a number of current graduate students at the University of South Carolina who have received the Graduate Research Fellowship in a variety of different disciplines, and they're all happy to meet with you and to talk about their experience there. And I think, you know, especially when it comes to just the application itself and like the personal statement, even if someone isn't in your specific field, you know, while their ability to talk about the research is going to be a little more limited in terms of thinking about how to represent your experience, in terms of how to put together that kind of narrative there, it can be good to have a conversation with someone who's kind of gone through that and, you know, has seen some of the quirks of those sort of things and has maybe thought through some of those kind of issues that you're thinking about as well. And so I'll say that in a minute here when I talk about some next steps, but please take advantage of the support that our office has and the great people like Tessa who are available to help you. Happy to share about their experiences and help you think through some of these same sort of things. And I'll just use that as a segue here to jump back to the last portion here, where I want to talk a little bit about some next steps that you all can be taking and to talk a little bit about some of the resources and support that are available to you that I encourage you to take advantage of. So in terms of immediate next steps after this, if you've never worked with the National Fellowships Office before, I would encourage you to create what we call a candidate profile. This just puts you in our database, and when you do that, you can indicate an interest in a particular fellowship, and so you can just click National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. That lets you know, lets us know that this is something that you're considering applying for, and we can just be sure to be in contact with you as we have additional events taking place and activities that are related to putting together an application for this as well. You can connect with our office. I'll say more about the ways that we can do that in a minute here as well. Then I would really encourage you to talk with a faculty mentor. You know, maybe it's your advisor, if you're a current graduate student, or you know, a faculty member who you've done mentored research with, or a lab if you're in a lab science here as well, to let them know that you're interested in applying, to kind of help pick their brain a little bit, to get some ideas maybe about that research, some suggestions maybe about, you know, some of your interests, and they might be able to recommend some things to think about or some literature that you can pursue reading to think about how you might develop a project based on that. I would also encourage you to take a look at the NSF GRFP website, and I will be sharing these slides with all of you in a follow-up tomorrow, and you can click on these links here as well. There's a lot of information from NSF, much deeper details around eligibility, a pretty detailed FAQ page that gets a little bit more into the weeds with some of these sort of things too. And then if you are a current undergraduate and you haven't already begun this process yet, now is a great time to be exploring graduate programs. You know, the summer is a time to be reaching out to potential programs to learn more information, and also to start thinking about putting together drafts of materials for your graduate applications, which again really go along with the kind of things that NSF is asking you to do. If you're applying to a graduate program, you're going to be putting together a statement of purpose, a document that's going to talk about your goals for that graduate program, talk about your research interests and qualifications. Depending on the program, you may have a separate personal statement as well, or have the option to submit a statement that provides a little bit more context about your experience and background and things that have helped kind of shape you and have led you to this particular point here. So, you know, the research statement, the personal statement, the kind of things that you'll be responding to as you're writing for NSF are in slightly different form, the type of things that you're going to be including in the type of documents that you'll be writing for a lot of graduate programs. Not necessarily the same formatting, the same length. Again, it may be combined into one document or maybe a couple separate ones, but the general principle behind it about the things that have qualified you and have gotten you interested in pursuing a graduate degree, and the things that you want to do research-wise in that degree are things that graduate programs want to know about. And if you've been thinking about that for NSF, that will only enhance your applications for all those other programs there. So those are some things that you can be starting with in you know, the time at the end of the semester, or at least over the summer, especially, you know, once the busyness of the academic year has come to an end. National Fellowships is here to help you with support throughout the entire process as well. Please come and meet with us. I'm happy to meet with anybody who wants to learn more about the NSF GRFP, or again, thinking about particular aspects of the application, or answering questions about your eligibility, or thinking through some brainstorming things for, you know, for different aspects of the application there. So please go ahead and take advantage of us. We're always happy to review drafts of materials at any stage. We have a number of other points of support as well. I already mentioned our great fellowship peer mentors. Please reach out to them. We even have a program where we will pay for you to have coffee with them on campus, so you can spend our money and get some great advice on these opportunities here. And then we also have a group of faculty. We're finalizing that list right now, who have experience with NSF, with mentoring students. In some cases, have served on review panels for this particular opportunity, actually, and they are all available to talk to as well, and can offer you some guidance as well. We will have a place for you to gather together some of these resources in a Microsoft Teams group. All of you will be given access to that once we get that up and running, and that will have the materials from the workshops that we've done. We'll have some links to where you can find some sample applications to help give you an idea of how other people have approached these sort of things as well. The solicitation, official documents from NSF there. And then we also have a series of workshops and events over the summer that can help you prepare your application too. And so we really encourage applicants to use the summer to start getting their application ready to go. And so we would encourage you to set aside the few hours over the course of the coming months here to check in and to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the different parts of the application here. This is not a requirement. You don't have to work with us or talk with us at all to apply for the NSF GRFP. This is an individual fellowship. You don't have to apply through the university. There's no internal nomination process or something there. But we offer these points of support along the way as a way to help you stay on track, to kind of have some regular check-in so that you're still thinking about this application. And we try to make this as flexible as possible because we know over the summer you may be working, you may be doing a research experience or something there, that it's not always the case that you might be able to drop everything to do a workshop that we might be doing in person on campus or something. So as part of that, we really encourage you, if you haven't had a conversation with our office about the NSF GRFP, to talk with one of us. I am the person who I'll work with anybody, undergraduate or graduate student for NSF. Chastity Graham, our undergraduate STEM advisor, is also available, and she would be another good person to talk to about this particular program too. So you can make appointments with either one of us. And again, we're happy to learn a little bit more about the programs you're thinking about, to help you think about brainstorming, maybe thinking about who would be good individuals to write letters of recommendation, answer any questions along the way there. And so that's gonna be a good point to sort of kickstart that process and start reflecting on that as well. And if you're an undergraduate and you want to meet with Chastity, you can schedule through Navigate. I need to update the slide. I don't have any availability to Navigate right now. If you want to meet with me, use Calendly/grad fellowships, undergraduate or graduate, that's fine to schedule a time to talk with me, and I'm happy to do that. As I mentioned, it's really important to talk with somebody in your field who knows about your research. And so while I'm happy to read over drafts of research statement, what I will not be doing is telling you what your research should be. I'm a discipline expert there. I can help you organize ideas and structure things there, but you really need to be getting input from faculty, either your current advisor or PI or other people who have mentored you in research experiences here, or somebody at a graduate program that you may be in contact with who's already interested in you and maybe has started a conversation around research, or one of the great faculty volunteers who serve in our campus committee, again, that will be sending you more information about a little bit more. But I think it's useful to have a check-in with somebody to let them know, if you haven't already had a conversation with them, about your research experience and the fact that you're interested in graduate school and the fact that you're thinking about this program, and see if they can give you some feedback and maybe some guidance about next steps as you're trying to formulate a research proposal for that. So those are some great ways to sort of check in and get things started here. And then over the summer, we'll be doing a series of virtual workshops. We have a series of 3 workshops. We'll start off with a deep dive with the review criteria. Again, we did a very brief overview of what intellectual merit and broader impacts looks like, but this will really unpack that and again help you think about some specific examples that might be relevant for this particular application here. And then we'll do a workshop that will be on each of the two main written components, really breaking down what makes a compelling personal statement, looking at some sample language from previous successful proposals, and then doing the same thing with the research statement too, thinking about what are you really trying to accomplish with this document, what are the best ways to kind of organize it, useful things to include. We'll go over the official formatting for all of those things there as well. So this will be a chance to really go into greater detail about the things that I've just done in a much quicker version tonight, because we're just doing an overview here. What we've done, and we will set the dates a little bit later in the summer. We have done these typically either in late June through July, and we've usually offered these virtual workshops at 2 times each week. And we'll take a survey of people who are interested in applying that we're aware of and try to pick some times that work well with everyone there. But we're trying to work with your schedule and to provide some flexibility there. And all of these sessions will be recorded as well. We'll save those recordings in the Teams group. And so if you're not able to attend, you can still access any of the materials that go along with that. All right, so I see we're almost at time here. I want to I'll share this in the chat here and then I'll send it as a follow-up as well. But I'm going to give you a resource that is really a worksheet that's meant to help get you started thinking about some of the key questions and just the key application components too, helping you think about, who are people who could be good recommenders, helping you do a little bit of reflection around some key experiences and things there, thinking about the kind of ways you've been involved and how that might connect with broader impact activities and things as well. And so, again, since it's 8 o'clock right now, I don't want to be respectful of everyone's time. I'm not going to hold us here to do this, but I will go ahead and put in the chat a document that you are welcome to spend a little time using to jumpstart the brainstorming here. This is also the sort of thing that if you've started on it and you want to have a meeting with somebody in the fellowship's office, you could bring this with you and kind of talk through some of the things that you found there as well. But these are just, again, some questions to help you think about just getting started with your application, just to get some ideas down on the page there. And again, for all the sessions that we'll be doing over the summer, we will have some additional handouts and things there to help think more specifically about the particular components of the different written statements and things here. Questions from anyone about anything that I've gone over? Again, this is just meant to provide an introduction. This is not an exhaustive overview of everything that goes into the NSF GRFP. I'm happy to talk in more length individually. Really what I'm hoping that you're going to take away at this point is a sense that, yes, this is something that might be a good fit with the type of program that I'm looking at, and just know that there are going to be opportunities for you to get some additional supports. And then now is really just a good time to start thinking about that a little bit so that you spend a little time over the summer and you're ready to go in the fall and have a strong application. Because that deadline, that 3rd week of October, is going to come faster than you realize. It's going to be within like 6 weeks probably of the semester starting there. And if you haven't thought of anything until that point, it's just going to be a little bit harder to put together a good application. So I think it's great that you're here right now. This is a great time to be starting that process. And hopefully by checking in a little bit, by coming to a few sessions, by carving out, an hour a week or something there to start thinking through some of these things, you'll be in a great position come this fall and be able to submit a strong application that will hopefully set you up for success with your other grad applications. And then ideally provides a great source of funding that can really be transformative for your graduate experience, as you heard about earlier from Tessa. I'm happy to stick around if anybody has some final questions here. I'll go ahead and stop the recording as well. But otherwise, I appreciate all of you coming. Like I said, I will send these slides to all of you as well. I'll give you access to our Teams group a little bit later when we have all that ready to go. And I'm happy to follow up with any of you individually.